Everyone in this town is a tad strange. Except, ironically, tad strange.
Hi guys, Tad's the name, and being normal's my game.
Loving you, Tad!
And I love bread.
You know, Dead by Daylight is beginning to grow old. There are now 44 survivors and 37 killers, and that number just keeps on growing. So, it is expected that some characters will be forgotten over time, while others remain in the limelight. Of all the characters to exist within Dead by Daylight, I think there is only one character who I never see anyone talk about, and that is Felix Richter. Unlike other survivors who drop and have niche but loud audiences, or have audiences the size of a football stadium, Felix just showed up in the Entities realm one day, and no one really talked about it. I suspect this has to do with visual flair, as compared to other survivors around the time who were entering the realm with a unique sense of style. Felix was just a random German in a suit. Then, of course, there was Blight, who released with him, and I don't think the human pinball was willing to share the limelight with Felix with all the controversies and issues he sparked. Behavior have at least attempted to create some interest in Felix, obviously by using him as their token hot guy when it comes to cosmetics, but let's be real here. They peaked when they added Maximilian Pegasus, and have only failed afterwards.
You're always so uptight, Kaiba boy. Why don't you treat yourself to a nice vacation?
With everything that has happened with Felix, I honestly feel bad for him, as I kind of like we have a more normal looking survivor, an everyman who you could see on the street, who isn't as much of a clown as Dwight. Now when it comes to these perks, they luckily dodge the bullet compared to Felix. Well, most of them. Two of these perks have become rather well known compared to many of the other perks in the Why No One Uses series, and this has raised concern for viewers. Most of the perks that I have talked about tend to be rather niche in use, and have been forgotten over time, but Felix's perks are still rather fresh, and have seen use in particular builds. With that said, there was a big reason why I placed Felix on the poll for Why No One Uses, and it is the philosophy I have always followed when making these videos. I always ask the question, does a perk fulfill a task and does it do it well? And Felix's perks, just like many of the perks I've discussed before, either need help with the second part, or completely shatter at step 1. That being said, there is one perk that passes that philosophy with flying colors, but even still, its usage rate is not as high as other perks, raising interesting discussions about it.
Well, how about some soda, guys?
Yes, please. Thanks, friend.
How about some for your best friend?
Thanks, best friend.
Can I have some now, buddy?
Wait, I need some more.
I still didn't get any.
There you go. More, please.
To end the suspense I built with the introduction, let's talk about that one perk that passes my philosophy when making this series, and that is Built to Last. This is a perk that is rather unique to Dead by Daylight, as we never saw a perk like it before when it first came out. Behavior have meddled with perk designs that influence items in some way, from streetwise and overwhelming presence, with how they manipulate item drain rates, to Franklin's demise and its many iterations over time. Outside of these perks, however, Behavior have not really experimented with item-related perks before, as it can be a double-edged sword if balanced improperly. Items have been notorious when it came to balance long ago, from green medkits healing within 8-second windows, to toolboxes promoting either a sabo or an instant repair meta. With that being said, I believe Built to Last has found itself in an interesting place, especially after Behavior have finally found a sweet spot for the more oppressive items in the game. Going over Built to Last's effect, when you hide within a locker for 12 seconds with a depleted item, it will regain 99% of its charges. This perk can be used multiple times, but each use reduces the number of charges refreshed by 33%. This means that on first use you get 99%, second is 66%, third is 33%, and then the perk is done. Simply put, this perk is good, like really good. Having the ability to refresh an item's charges, especially when it is empowered with strong add-ons, is not a laughing matter. Gen builds have found Built to Last a great option to bring commodious toolboxes back on the table after use. Medkit players used to love using this perk back when it could have 2 heals within 8 seconds. And interestingly, it's found a unique use for keys. The Blood Ember is a powerful add-on for keys, and being able to refresh a free wall hack on an item is what the hip kids would call neat. Also, Build to Last has found itself as a fun cheat to archive challenges where you need to deplete an item multiple times, and let's be honest with ourselves, we have all done this at some point. Overall, Build to Last is great the way it is. It has an identity of refreshing items, and even with the newest addition to this group, with Scavenger and Exaltation, Build to Last maintains its unique spot in that group. Additionally, Build to Last is the strongest of the 3 perks, as it has the lowest demanding cost with the highest and most immediate reward. So that means there's nothing else to talk about this perk, right? Well, not exactly. Even though Build to Last has become a powerful perk within its subgroup of perks, especially after its rework, the perk only sees a pick rate of 2%. Not bad, especially considering the many other perks I have talked about, but when you think about its power, you begin to wonder, why is it not seen more? So, like I do with all my videos on why no one uses, let's talk about why Build to Last isn't seen more. The first problem with the perk that I am sure everyone is immediately thinking about is the fact that item builds are just not popular. There are a lot, and I mean a lot of different build paths that exist in Dead by Daylight, and most of them only need perks to function. Trap builds such as Blast Mine with its fellow trap related perks, healing builds, anti-tunnel, anti-slug, 5-man chase, pirate, the list goes on and on. Simply put, there are a ton of builds that players are willing to play around with, and they will find something they enjoy. Item builds, however, are a bit of a tricky gamble, as these builds are very one-note compared to others. Let's use one of the most popular builds as an example. That being an exhaustion build with sprint burst, fixated, vigil, and the last perk can be whatever you want to imagine. This build can be utilized in a variety of ways, from moving faster from objective to objective, being used to make distance when a chase starts, or even being used during a chase if you can get the exhaustion down. Then you could also use the subtle stealth elements of the build, from fixated and its increased walking speed, and if you pair lightweight, then you can play around it with scratch mark manipulation. Long story short, there are a variety of things you can do with this build, either swapping certain perks to lean more into different playstyles, or utilizing the strengths of the build in unique ways. Item builds are different, as they only exist to enhance the items at what they are already good at. Build to Last may be able to refresh an item multiple times, but that is it. And as players play around with item builds more and more, they will find it very one-note. Items in the game tend to be very straightforward, and their level of variability of playstyle is almost non-existent. Even toolboxes, which have the most varied gameplay because of their interaction of hooks or generators, is very fixed, especially since most players prefer to blitz through generators rather than attempting a sabotage play. This has slowly begun to be remedied recently, with perks like Residual Manifest and Champion of Light, but they only affect flashlights, which was the one item that players tended to not pair with Build to Last. This is all to say that players want to run fun builds, and not just win all the time. And sadly, Build to Last and the builds that it has the ability to pair with are very one-dimensional, resulting in the fun factor dying out fast. Speaking about the perks like Champion of Light and Residual Manifest, another issue Build to Last suffers from is the fact new perks are arriving to support item builds in unique ways. Build to Last was unique in its time, since it was the only perk to refresh items, and that was special back then. Now we have other perks that affect items in more ways than just charge refresh, or do similar effects in more interesting ways. Exaltation and Scavenger aren't as strong as Build to Last when it comes to item refresh, or the variety of items they can impact, but they both provide interesting dynamics that Build to Last cannot compete with. Unlike Build to Last that just needs you to enter a locker and wait for a short time, Exaltation needs you to get a pallet stun, while Scavenger needs you to land 5 great skill checks. Their effects require more effort, but in exchange they provide enjoyable minigames and extra elements. Exaltation, in addition to a 25% recharge, upgrades the item by 1 rarity, allowing you to end the match from a yellow flashlight to a purple if played correctly. Scavenger is a little more tricky, as it applies a minus 50% repair penalty for 30 seconds, but being able to refresh a toolbox and not having a penalty on how many times you can do it is very scary. You can support your team during that period through taking chase, healing, disrupting secondary objectives, and during that time you can trade your toolbox to a teammate who isn't impacted by Scavenger slowdown. Then there are a few other perks out there that provide other secondary item effects, from Residual Manifest and Scavenger's ability to rummage a certain item, to Champion Light and its movement manipulations during a flashlight blind. These perks are very few when compared to other build paths in the game, but it is a slowly growing subgroup, one I suspect will turn into a rather interesting build over time. It is because of these different effects that Build to Last begins to feel rather plain in comparison, not only from the lackluster activation requirement, but to the simple effect. It's a powerful effect, but one that is very one-dimensional, especially compared to its competition. The last issue about Build to Last is a rather interesting one, because you could say that all of the item-themed perks suffer from the same issue, but I argue that Build to Last suffers the most from it. Unlike other perks where they can stand strong alone, Build to Last needs an item to work, meaning that if behavior decide to fiddle with items and their numbers, Build to Last is going to get hit pretty hard in the face. It's a ball and chain effect. If an item gets adjusted, then Build to Last is going to be affected by the change. However, if Build to Last is affected by a change, the items won't suffer as severely. It's an interesting argument about why Build to Last doesn't see much play, and we have an example of this affecting the perk rather recently. Medkits used to be more powerful than they are today, where paired with the right add-ons on a green medkit, you could heal yourself twice within 8 seconds. This is extremely fast, and it was something that got worse as more healing-based perks came into play. Build to Last used to be paired with medkits to add more heals into the medkit, allowing survivors even more chances to heal themselves throughout a match. With the update to healing speeds on the medkits, and the updated add-ons, Build to Last got hit, because players found the increased charges from Build to Last were no longer worth it. Medkits now shifted from quantity of uses to quality and when to use it properly. Now, it is not extinct, as there are plenty of players out there who pair Build to Last with a good medkit, but compared to back then, it is not as powerful as it once was. So to quickly recap the flaws on Build to Last. It's a perk that has very few build paths, and the paths that it can work with are very one note. The perk has alternatives that, although not as strong, are more entertaining to activate, and it can easily fall in strength if behavior adjusts the items in the game. The perk has its flaws, as do most, but as I said early on, I believe that Build to Last is actually a very good perk. Being able to refresh an item's charges with the low cost of hiding in a locker for a short time is not that terrible, and the perk can work as a one-off rather than being the focus of a full build. It is why I don't believe behavior should adjust the perk. Rather, I believe if behavior want to see Build to Last used more often, they should introduce more items that work with it. The game has yet to introduce a new survival item to the game for a long time. The last one was the Blood Sense map, which was a year ago, and it was a map, something that has existed in the game since day one. It would be nice to see new items to reveal or perform new actions in unique ways. We could see spray cans that allow you to highlight objects in the match, dowsing rods to reveal totem spawns, or even better, could we finally get a map rework? It's been 8 long years behavior. Can we finally make this item tolerable to use? If anything, just make the glass bead base kit, and that is all I want. Thank you. Anyways, back to Build to Last. The perk is good. It has its issues that bring it down in popularity, but it doesn't distract from the fact that it is very powerful. Now, onto desperate measures before I lose it about behavior and their design of the map again.
Come on, come on! Evil, shadowy, evil things! Search!
You twit. You mean evil shadows?
I don't know.
What a loser.
When it comes to the perks in DBD, there is always one that people use to refer to a character. When people think of Adam, they think of Pebble. When they think of Jeff, they think of Distortion. When they think of Michaela, they think of the Felix is the same. as when someone does remember he exists, Desperate Measures is the perk they bring up. The perk's effect is simple. You gain a 14% boost to healing and unhooking speeds per each injured, dying, or hooked survivor, including yourself. This means you can reach a maximum of 56% towards healing and unhooking, and to be fair, this is a design I rather like for the perk. Desperate Measures is clearly designed around stabilizing the game. When the killer begins to go out of control, Desperate Measures is there to help you and your team recover. I really like the identity of Desperate Measures. It's a perk that I always make room for when making healing builds, and it makes it all the worse to think about why the perk is seen so little. Let's start with the first problem that is kind of obvious. The numbers of Desperate Measures are low. Obviously they need to be low, since the perk can build up over time to a larger quantity, and the fact that it can impact self-healing speeds, but we'll get to that one a bit later. The perk also suffers from a similar issue to Fire Up, a perk belonging to Freddy which I covered in the last Why No One Uses. The reason why the numbers are low is because Desperate Measures is not just a healing boost, but an unhooking speed boost. It is because of Desperate Measures adopting a jack-of-all-trades direction through altruistic play that the perk has to compensate the amount of things being supported with less power. In that case, it makes sense that the perk has higher number values compared to Fire Up, as it can lose strength if you begin to help stabilize your team back from a losing situation. That being said, there already exist perks in the game that either match up to Desperate Measures and its full potential, or that already exceed it. Bodily Knowledge is a great example, as the perk provides you a passive increase to healing speed by 50%. Although it is not exactly as high as Desperate Measures, Botany Knowledge is already giving you a flat healing boost compared to Desperate Measures, needing you to have the full team injured or worse. Then there are the other healing based perks that, although have their own requirements, help to prevent the game from entering the situations that Desperate Measures attempts to avoid. Boon Circle of Healing, Autodidact, and the recently buffed Empathic Connection are great examples of this. This discussion also raises the second problem that Desperate Measures has, and that there already exist other perks that help to stabilize the game in ways outside of what Desperate Measures attempts to do. As I previously said, Desperate Measures is a perk designed around the game spiraling out of control, and its main goal is to fish your team out when it becomes too much. But Behavior have already created a variety of perks to support that philosophy in different ways. Perks such as We'll Make It and We're Gonna Live Forever are great examples, as they are focused around healing your team back from severe situations, such as slugging, or to help recover survivors from being unhooked. Resurgence, Inner Strength, Self-Care, Reactive Healing, and Strength in Shadows are other good examples of helping you avoid giving the killer a snowball. These perks are more selfish in nature, but can help in the situations where you cannot rely on your team to help you reset. Then there exists the anti-tunnel perks, such as Decisive Strike, Off the Record, Babysitter, and so on, which help to delay the killer if they wish to force the game into entering a 3v1. Desperate Measures in comparison is a lot weaker to these perks, as the strength of all of the perks are fixed, while Desperate Measures starts slow and begins to grow larger over time. This perk does have its unique moments, especially as unhooking speed has only been explored with the perk No One Left Behind, which has resulted in Desperate Measures adopting a support perk identity. I have referenced this archetype many times before in my previous videos, but to give a simple explanation, support perks are designed around enhancing other perks, but remain weak or even useless when used alone. Desperate Measures is one of the most interesting support perks, as it has a double feature, as its healing boost is not limited to healing speeds on teammates. This results in Desperate Measures being a fun option for self-healing builds, where you can heal yourself much faster than compared to without it. But even then, there exists other perks such as Bodily Knowledge, which have a much faster base number in comparison. Now we have our third problem on why players don't run Desperate Measures, and it is a similar problem to another perk I have discussed in a previous video, that being Fast Track on Yunjin Lee. In that video, I discussed how the perk's design was being tampered with by the survivors who attempted self-unhooks, resulting in them being ejected from the trial early. Desperate Measures has a similar problem, but unlike Fast Track that at least grants you tokens on survivor hooks, Desperate Measure loses power as survivors die. Of all of the problems that Desperate Measure suffers from, I believe this is the biggest flaw that the perk endures, as other perks do not suffer from a similar issue. The only perk that I can think of that has this same problem is Thanatophobia on the killer side of perks, which does share a similar identity to Desperate Measures, where as you begin to injure more and more survivors, the slower the game becomes to help escalate the snowball. Considering the other two problems I mentioned about Desperate Measures, they only build on how much pain the third issue causes. Other perks that follow a design like Desperate Measures do not share in the element of losing power as survivors die. Instead, they become more valuable, as with there being less players, you will need something to help the team recover more often. To quickly reflect on the issues of Desperate Measures, its full potential is not as potent as other healing-based perks. Its competition for countering the killer snowball are much more rewarding and less risky, and the perk weakens as survivors leave the trial. Overall, the power of Desperate Measures is an interesting perk, as it leans very heavily into pulling your team out of the killer snowball. It's quite thematic, not as much as other thematic-based perks in the game, but it uses an interesting concept and bleeds it into gameplay. I believe that the perk can stand quite nicely with its current balance. It doesn't scream for attention like a lot of other perks, but I do have a few adjustments to help make the perk feel a little nicer to run. The first buff concept is a simple one, but I believe many would enjoy it, and that is to allow the perk to keep its charges even after a survivor leaves the trial. Considering the perk is designed around recovering your team when the killer spirals out of control, I am shocked that it ends up losing its value as your teammates begin to die. If anything, the perk should keep the benefits to help your team recover, considering you are a player short. Plus, it would allow the perk to be enhanced with supporting the builds it is already great at. The second buff concept is one I think could happen for Desperate Measures, but is one I am a little cautious about, and that would be to increase the perk's numbers. I am not exactly sure how far behavior could go with upgrading the numbers of the perk, as it can be a very messy thing to do when it comes to perk balance. As I said before, Desperate Measures has found itself adopting a support perk identity for self-healing builds, and when it comes to balance, it has had an infamous history. You cannot simply buff the numbers of Desperate Measures and not expect it to cause trouble, especially after behavior put in all that effort to reduce the self-healing meta. If I were to enhance the perk's numbers, I would go for a similar direction to Thanatophobia, where the perk gains a massive boost when all allies meet the perk's requirements. Let's go with 20% increase as an example. This would keep the perk weak early on, but enhance its identity for when you need to pull your team out of a sticky situation. If I were to choose which of the two buff concepts I prefer, I would go for option 1, but in reality the perk is fine the way it is. I find Desperate Measures is a really useful perk when combined with other altruistic builds, and although it is rather weak alone, I believe balancing it to be stronger can have negative effects if left unchecked. I would much rather have a perk with an exceptional concept with a more mellow effect compared to a powerful perk that causes trouble for the long term.
Well, what do we have here? A disturbing little mechanical doggy with a waffle iron for a face. Oh, and he has a juicer for a foot. How perfectly random.
It is very clear that behavior are never going to make every perk in the game perfect, as we have seen from the last 8 years of behavior's wondrous balancing decisions. That being said, I will admit that when it comes to perk philosophies, I do enjoy looking at what behavior have attempted to make. But there is one perk out there that has made me flat out mad. Not only because it's a design that feels so unbelievably boring, but because it has been repeated so many times and has already been perfected before. Visionary is a very simple perk, with the effect of revealing generator auras within a 32-meter radius from you. This comes with a cost of going on a 16-second cooldown once a generator is completed. Okay, I need to talk about this, because literally, why is there even a whole 16-second cooldown? I get why cooldowns exist within the game, as it is a form to balance perks and killer designs that can be oppressive without one, With that said, there should only be a cooldown when the effect of the thing is powerful enough to warrant it. Having the ability to see generator auras is not something new in Dead by Daylight. In fact, it has been explored many times already. Here, I will give you a list of perks that reveal generator auras right now. Better Together, Detective's Hunch, Clairvoyance, Boon Illumination, Lucky Star, Rookie Spirit, Still Sight, Troubleshooter, and even the old Quick Gambit used to do this. The catch is that all of these perks had certain requirements to activate or have set timers for their duration, but in exchange they reveal a significant amount of objects in the trial, or have something extra they provide to warrant their cost. Visionary has a very stationary effect of providing an aura read of generators, and that is it. Now, some of you may give the excuse that, oh, the reason the cooldown is there is because of how powerful that information can be. Then why does Bond not have a cooldown? This perk has been in the game since day one, and gives if not more information than Visionary could ever dream to give. And yet it has no cooldown whatsoever. Long story short, the cooldown makes me very fed up. Also, you may notice that I did not include a particular perk in that list I gave a minute or so ago, and that is because I'm going to talk about that real soon. I first want to bring up the second issue with Visionary, which is a rather interesting problem certain perks in DBD face. When behavior design perks, they have said they prefer to make one perk that is silly, one for veterans, and one for newer players. This isn't new, as we have seen this in recent years. But there are some perks that have the problem of behavior pushing too far on correcting a perk for the new player experience. I call this new player syndrome, where a perk was designed in such a way that it works well for a new player, but falls apart when they do not need to run it anymore. Technician is the best example of new player syndrome, a perk with the core intention of hiding missed generator skill checks. When used for a new player who is unable to land skill checks, it is nice. But once that player learns how to land them, Technician loses all of its usefulness. Visionary has the exact same problem, where it is designed to teach new players the locations of generator spawns. Granted, due to the random nature of DBD, these spawn locations can change from game to game, but veterans will understand the general locations to search for generators after some time. This causes Visionary to fall flat, as it has nothing else it can offer to veteran players, and what it does offer to the new player is a perk that has a 16-second cooldown for when you do the objective, and yes, I am still complaining about the cooldown. Now the last problem, and that is there are better alternatives compared to Visionary. Obviously, I've mentioned this issue many times before on other perks, but there is one perk that makes Visionary an absolute joke to run. Deja Vu was the one perk I did not mention in the list I spoke of earlier. And the reason why I did not mention it then was because I wanted to save that bucket of worms for now. If you do not know what Deja Vu does, it reveals the 3 generators that are closest to each other, along with granting you a 6% repair speed boost on the highlighted gens. Now, I don't know about you, but Deja Vu sounds rather powerful. You get to know early on what 3 gen potentials the killer has, a repair boost to help remove that possibility, the knowledge of where generators spawn, and what a surprise, no cooldown. The perk used to have a timer to its effect, but that was removed ages ago. And even if it still had a timer, there is one last element to Deja Vu that would have left it more popular than Visionary. The perk is free.
Free?
Unlike Visionary, where you need to buy and level up Felix, or unlock it from the Shrine of Secrets, Deja Vu is available to every player on every survivor. The only catch is that you need to find it on the Bloodweb, but let's be honest with ourselves, it isn't that difficult. Overall, Visionary just makes me angry. It's a perk with a pointless cooldown, it suffers from new player syndrome, and with the existence of Deja Vu, it struggles to even be considered a worthy option for information. Behavior could literally do anything to Visionary, and it would be infinitely better than what it is now. You know, just remove the cooldown. That is all you gotta do, and immediately it is a great choice for new players. It removes the perk punishing the player for doing the objective, and it makes it more appealing for the new player experience. Would it be run more often? Probably not with Deja Vu around, but at least it would have some use. Now, if Behavior wanted to keep the cooldown, for some forsaken reason, a second option to changing the perk is to give it a secondary effect. One idea I had was to reward the veteran player experience if Visionary popped during a chase. It would keep its original effect, but when a generator activates, you stop seeing the generator's auras, and instead see survivors, pallets, and windows for 20 seconds. It would turn Visionary into a blend of Deja Vu and Windows of Opportunity, not excelling at what both perks do, but providing a decent amount of tools if you wanted the extra room for more perks. I also flipped the cooldown of Visionary around from tier 1 to tier 3 variant, since the aura read when generators are offline for Visionary would be more interesting. Honestly, I would be happy if any of these two changes I recommended for Visionary happened to the base game, but anything would be better to make the perk worth using at this point. Felix is a weird character for me. His perks are possibly some of the most practical for anyone to consider getting, yet at the same time they each have their own issues that result in their low popularity. They aren't explicitly bad. Instead, it more so has to do with outside factors, from different perks, player playstyles, and behavior's wonderful balancing. All that being said, I do still like how down-to-earth Felix's perks are. Nothing too mystical, yet nothing too boring, well, outside of Visionary. They are all perks that perfectly fit him as the German architect he was designed to be. And you know, I am glad to have them in the game. Now, if only Behavior could make Visionary an interesting perk. That would be nice, right, Maximilian Pegasus?
Take away that empty shell. Teach it to wash dishes or something.
I wish you all the best of luck in your games, everyone. You will definitely need it. Especially if you see a teammate running Visionary.